Gyrojet pistol developed in the early 1960s by MB Associates. This handgun fired self-propelled micro-rockets instead of traditional bullets. Rather than relying on a gunpowder charge to launch the projectile, each round ignited its own rocket motor after leaving the barrel, meaning the weapon produced almost no recoil and required no heavy barrel to contain explosive pressure. This also made the gun extremely lightweight, but the rockets were slow to accelerate, giving them poor accuracy and weak stopping power at close range. Despite interest from the military and even NASA for potential use in space, manufacturing inconsistencies and unreliable ignition ultimately doomed the project to commercial failure. Davy Crockett recoilless rifle fielded in the early 1960s. This was the smallest and lightest nuclear weapon system ever deployed by the United States, designed to be carried and fired by a 2- or 3-man infantry team. It launched a low-yield nuclear warhead from a jeep, mounted or tripod launcher, intended to stop massed Soviet armored columns advancing across Western Europe. The weapon's blast radius was so significant relative to its short range that crews operating it risked exposure to lethal radiation from their own detonation. Its existence reflected a period when tactical nuclear weapons were seriously considered for use on a conventional battlefield. Bat bomb, conceived during the Second World War under the codename Project X-Ray. This device involved attaching small incendiary charges to Mexican free-tailed bats, which were then released from canisters dropped over Japanese cities. The bats would instinctively roost in the eaves and attics of wooden buildings before the timers ignited, theoretically starting thousands of fires simultaneously across a target area. In one accidental test at an airbase in New Mexico, released bats set fire to a hangar and a general's car, demonstrating the concept's destructive potential. The program was ultimately canceled in 1944 after consuming significant funding once the atomic bomb program was prioritized instead. Pigeon-guided missile. Developed by behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner under Project Pigeon, this system used trained pigeons housed in the nose cone of a glide bomb to peck at a screen showing the target below, with their movements mechanically adjusting the bomb's steering fins. The birds were conditioned through reward-based training to recognize specific target shapes, offering a crude but functional guidance system decades before electronic homing technology matured. Military evaluators found the concept effective in testing but were reluctant to trust a weapon guided by live animals. The program was shelved in 1944, though a later version briefly resurfaced in the 1950s under the name Project Orcon before radar guidance made it obsolete. M202 Flash, introduced during the Vietnam War. This shoulder-fired launcher held 4 rockets in a rotating cluster, each armed with a thickened incendiary agent similar in composition to napalm. Unlike single-shot flame weapons, it allowed an infantryman to engage multiple targets or saturate an area without needing to reload between shots, giving it far greater sustained firepower than earlier flamethrowers. Its incendiary rounds could burn through cover and bunkers where conventional explosives had limited effect, making it especially valuable in close jungle terrain. Concerns over the weapon's classification under international incendiary weapons treaties eventually limited its export and long-term adoption. Beehive artillery rounds, officially designated as anti-personnel tracer rounds, these were developed in the 1960s to fire thousands of small steel flechettes from a single artillery shell spreading outward in a shotgun. Like pattern, named for the buzzing sound the flechettes made in flight, they were designed as a last line of defense against massed infantry assaults on fixed positions such as fire bases. A single round from a large caliber howitzer could blanket an area larger than a football field with lethal fragments in under a second. Their psychological impact was as significant as their physical effect, often breaking enemy assaults before they reached defensive lines. Nuclear artillery shell. Fired from the M65 atomic cannon, nicknamed Atomic Annie, this 280mm shell was tested in Nevada in 1953, delivering a nuclear yield roughly equal to the bomb dropped on Hiroshima from a conventional-looking towed gun. The cannon itself weighed over 40 tons and required 2 massive tractor units to transport, making it far less practical than the missile systems that soon replaced it. Only 20 of the cannons were ever built, and none were fired in combat, though the successful test proved that a nuclear warhead could be miniaturized enough to fit inside a standard artillery casing. This capability was later adapted into smaller, more mobile nuclear shells for existing howitzers throughout the Cold War. Sonic and acoustic hailing devices developed for both military and law enforcement use in the 2000s. These directional speaker systems focused beams of extremely loud sound, capable of causing pain and disorientation at ranges exceeding 300 meters. Originally designed to issue warnings to approaching vessels near naval ships, they were later adapted for crowd control, using the discomfort threshold of the human ear rather than kinetic force to disperse people. Because the sound can be aimed narrowly like a beam of light, operators can target specific individuals or vehicles without affecting bystanders outside the cone. Their non-lethal classification made them attractive for use in situations where firearms were considered excessive. Flying aircraft carriers. In the early 1930s, the Navy operated the USS Akron and USS Macon, two massive helium airships each capable of launching and recovering small biplane fighters directly from an internal hangar using a retractable trapeze mechanism. The fighters had no landing gear, relying entirely on a hook to catch the trapeze bar while in flight, allowing the airship to extend its scouting range far beyond what its own crew could see. This system functioned as an aerial extension of a conventional carrier's flight deck years before fixed wing carriers dominated naval doctrine. Both airships were lost in separate structural accidents by 1935, ending the program before its full potential could be explored. XM-214 Microgun, a scaled-down man-portable version of the six-barreled minigun concept. This weapon was developed in the 1970s to give infantry the same electrically driven rotary firing system used on helicopter gunships. Firing standard rifle, caliber rounds at rates exceeding 1,000 per minute, it required a battery pack to spin its barrels, making ammunition supply, rather than the mechanism itself, the limiting factor in sustained use. Its extreme rate of fire made it impractical for individual soldiers to carry enough ammunition to justify its weight, and it never entered widespread service. The design nonetheless influenced later vehicle, mounted and remote weapon systems that retained the rotary barrel concept for suppressive fire.